All right, ladies, gentlemen, foodies of all ages, we're back with another episode of Booze, Desserts, Smoke&Meats. I'm one of your hosts, the Meat Viking, with my wonderful co-host.
Hey, this is Professor Porkloin, aka Dr. Chef Hubs, and we are back, man. So
We
another week
are
of this.
back. Another week, and what a week we have. Um, we've been been spitballing some ideas for a while now, and I think it's time to reveal something to you guys. And well, Professor, you want to reveal what we got?
I mean, I can certainly tell the viewers what we got. So, I mean, look, man, we're official. We officially official. We got ourselves some mugs,
Mm-hmm.
some uh some Yeti mugs, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's got our names on them. So,
Yeah.
geez, Professor Porkloin there, and you got the Meat Viking. So the
That's
cool
right.
thing about this stuff is that this stuff even glows in the dark.
It
So I wish we
does.
could show you, but there's too much light, at
Yeah.
least in my spot. So this was one of the things that I feel like we were going to becoming officially official.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into how we got this stuff, I have to ask you, man, what's in your cup? What's in your brand new cup for this week?
I went with a classic. Well, not so much. No, that's a classic. It's something I've been drinking a lot on the show. I went with a classic White Russian.
Okay. Well,
And
I have been doing a lot of the same stuff. So I've been drinking a lot of rum and Coke. So that is what is in my cup today. Sailor Jerry and Coke, man.
mm,
So I feel like I have to cheers you through the there you go. Hey man, cheers through
cheers.
through the camera.
That's right. Now,
So you want to tell us how we procured these fine pieces of merchandise?
yes. So the first thing we did was went through the person who did our logo and design, and we talked to them. And I was like, "Hey, how do you feel about getting your design on some merchandise?" And I got the approval for it. We set out some limits. Essentially, I got her blessing to use it, and that was big for us. And then my mom is actually the one who made the cups, so I went through her, and you can find her on Facebook at Sassy Decal Diva. And these links will be in the show notes below. And went through her, the professor and I. We pitched some ideas back and forth, and we came up with for us, we got the decal on the front of our logo, and then we have our host names on here. Um, However, if one of the foodies want to order, there's an option to where you just message her directly. She can custom make whatever you want. And if you want one of these, you can get like the decal on both sides. You can get them on any color, any size you want. Um, I can't tip mine over right now to show you what's on the bottom because I don't have my lid. Do you have your lid on
I
yours?
do, but you can probably see a little bit there. Yeah. So
Yes.
here, hold on. Let me turn it just a little bit.
Yep.
So you see that it says bacon is my safe word on the
Mm-hmm.
bottom.
And then we have her
So
her
it's
name
got
and
her,
then
yeah, her stuff right there, decal on the stuff, but you see the weights and the bacon and everything. So it's got a cool little Easter egg thing on the bottom
that's
for
right.
for us.
And so
And I feel like if you wanted to buy one of these, anybody who's listening, you can make your own name, and I think that'd be pretty cool because if you do that, you obviously can be part of the BDSM nation, and you can tag us with your fancy, cool little logo and what your name is.
I
So
like that idea. I like that idea a lot. And then another thing that they can do that I had talked about is say you foodies out there have a favorite episode by the time of watching this. Pick one of those favorite safe words from one of the previous episodes, and she
put
could
that
put
on
that
your
at the bottom of the cup as your Easter egg.
there you go.
So,
So hopefully, if people are watching, they would certainly, support some local business stuff and get one of those mugs for us. And then I think later on, we'll probably try to find a way to do some other merchandising thing along the road. But
right.
we're still fairly new, so once we figure that out, we will certainly make those announcements on where you can find those things.
Exactly. And, cut of this portion does go to both us, the cup maker, and the artist Chai Cat.
Yeah.
So, but
So, well, so we have to decide what the safe word is for today. What do you got?
In jest, I was thinking a fitting safe word would be cups.
Okay, that could work.
That
I'm down with that.
was a toss up in my brain between cups or blueberry muffins, and I don't know which one I like more.
Well, I think cups probably fits in a little bit easier with the beginning of what our show is today. So,
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. So cups it is.
but so what are we getting into today, man?
We are going to get into some side cuts. And we ain't talking them fancy hipster hairstyles. I mean, if you look at the professor and myself,
Yeah,
you're both far from fancy hipsters.
I don't have any hair to do anything with anyway, so
You can make a side cut out of that beard you got.
I'd rather make the side cut out of the mustache and just flip it up.
There you go.
So,
We're talking about side cuts of beef. Some of the my favorite cuts actually come from the side of the beef. And then later on, depending on how much time we get into, we're going to look at, for those of you that could potentially secure a whole side of beef, how would you go about it? And what are some of the benefits to doing that? And, your basics.
well, I feel like if we're going to start out, we kind of have to give them just a basic idea of what type of cuts are out there and then going into. So you have a guide
I do.
ready to be pulled up to see what are some of those main cuts, and then we can talk about some of those smaller ones.
Yeah. So as you can see, should show up on the screen right now, where we've got essentially a silhouette view of a cow. And this is a very basic diagram. There are a lot more diagrams that go further in depth than this. But this shows, you've got your chalk up by your shoulder, ribs where you would expect ribs to be, your short loin, your sirloin, your tenderloin, your top sirloin, bottom sirloin. You got your round brisket, plate, which also I believe is called a shank steak, but I could be wrong on that, unless shank comes from the shoulder. You got your flank, and then you got some shanks right here.
So most of the cuts, at least you're going to see, come from that loin, come from that short loin, and these are going to be your leaner cuts. So they tend to be better when you don't have as much fat in them.
Right.
So a lot of your loin cuts are going to be like your porterhouse, your T-bones, strip steaks, your fillets and stuff like that. So getting into just knowing where some of those cuts are so that if you be a little bit familiar with it. I mean, even the sirloin cuts, I mean, that's going to be more of the sirloin steaks. You can have your tri-tips. So main cuts are where you're going to have coming from that short loin, the tenderloin, long loin part. Now you can also get those rib cuts, and that's where a lot of your rib eyes are going to be. So those are going to be a little bit more marbling, as some of the restaurants I worked at has always said. You never say fat because nobody wants to eat fat, right? You want to say that it's marbled, but it is essentially fat,
Mm-hmm.
So with these, I mean, you're definitely gonna get your ribeye roasts, your steaks. This is where your back ribs are gonna be. You're gonna have your prime rib stuff coming from that. So the main ones are gonna come from that. If you ever go to a steak restaurant, I can guarantee you the majority of your steaks are gonna come from one of those cuts. So those are the primary ones. So we also have a lot of other ones too, and I think this is where the main part of our discussion for today is going to be looking at those side cuts, those other ones that you're not necessarily going to see at a restaurant when you're going to, let's say, a steakhouse. We get those prime cuts of either the fillets, the sirloins. So the first one, I mean, the chuck. Do you have any stuff to really talk about the chuck cut?
Not so much. On my end, I as far as recipe goes, I kind of like doing like a ground chuck, kind of like just a basic hamburger.
So from my knowledge of it, I mean, the chuck cut is basically going to be that type of cut that's good for pot roasts.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you can find a lot of different cuts that are good for grilling too. I mean, shoulder steak, stuff like that. But typically, your chuck is going to be great for some type of pot roast. Now, flat iron is also going to come from this one too. But remember, the flat iron is not going to be your biggest normal steak that you get. So this is where, again, that slow cooking, it's going to be something that hearty meat and potatoes type deal, and it will pair well with some nice dry rubs. It'll pair some nice one for a really good low and slow type of cook. So,
Or you could even make a Salisbury steak out of this and just drop that bitch in a lot of gravy and some mashed potatoes.
man, every time I think of Salisbury steak, I think of South Park.
Really?
Yeah, because that's what Chef always tried getting those kids to eat. Man, it's Salisbury steak day, kids.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, chuck roasts are your slow and slow with that one too, with your pot roasts type deal. So something you'll put on for 200 degrees or whatever in a pot roast for 8 hours, and then when you put into it, I mean, it will just melt away. But that's because you're getting all of those kind of juices in there, and it's just breaking down that toughness. So
Yeah, buddy.
the next one that you see on there, I mean, is the brisket cut, and I mean, you really can't go wrong with a brisket, right?
Mhm.
So the interesting thing about the brisket, though, is that there's two different points to it. You got the flat point or the point cut. So both of them are made to be cooked really slow, right? So for me, the brisket point works better than just the flat, because I feel even though the flat cut is a little bit leaner, um, the other cut is great because you have some of that extra little fat into it. And honestly, in my opinion, that's where that flavor comes from.
Mhm.
You know, I whenever order a steak, I always order one that has some of that marbling or fat. I
Oh
love
yeah.
the ribeyes. I love the prime ribs. You know, even New York strips have some marbling depending on where you get it from. But you know, the fillets, obviously they're tender, and they're very lean. Sirloins a little bit tougher. Your flat irons a little bit tougher, but very lean. They don't have any fat on them, or very small amounts of fat, and they're good. Just in my opinion, man, the fat is what's making that. So if within this brisket cut, having a little bit of that fat is just going to help with the juices, help kind of solidify that flavor profile that you have in there. So it's again, it lends itself to being a slower cooking meal, you know,
Mhm.
where you're putting it under 200 degrees and let it cook for 6-7 hours. So it really is a forgiving cut, but it's still delicious.
And like foodies out there, don't forget the general rule of thumb when you're cooking brisket is 30 to 60 minutes per pound. So if you got a 16-pound brisket, you want to cook that at 275, and that's going to take between 10 and 12 hours. So,
I would even go lower, to be honest with, if I'm smoking it.
oh yeah, if you're
I
smoking it,
usually keep that at about 200, maybe 225 at the most.
yeah. So and like that's to cook it. That's not including time for trimming that meat, injecting it, seasoning it, cooking it. Like in total, you could be looking at like 18 to 20 hours, which is why when you drive through like some of them barbecue places, one of the things you might see on one of their signs is it advertises how long that brisket's been cooked for. That's going to give you kind of an idea of about how tender and how juicy that brisket should be.
So let's talk about brisket for a second then, because it is one of those side cuts.
Um,
What type of seasoning do you like to throw on your brisket? When was the last time you cooked a brisket?
I haven't cooked a brisket in a long time. There is a very, very good barbecue place by my place
Okay.
that they do. It's I think it's called like some sort of sampler. It's either like a city sampler or the judge's like sampler, and that comes with brisket. It comes with some chicken, some sausage, and some dark meat turkey. And that brisket just falls apart in your mouth. And the only thing I ever do to it when it gets home to me is I just add some of their they got this fire sauce that's got like a nice heat to it. Not like a painful heat, but like a, you know, it gives you that nice little bit like a fire in your mouth, but not like a raging forest fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing that you're gonna be drinking a gallon of milk for, right?
Right, right.
So, what type of seasonings do you like to put on yours? Or, I mean, are you one that would just eat it without any barbecue sauce? Are you one of the ones that's like, hey, I can just do straight dry rub, eat it right from there, and it's perfect? Or do you have to add kind of like that barbecue of, hey, I'm going to throw on some barbecue sauce?
Oh no, I mean I could do that with just basic dry rub. You get like a nice brown sugar dry rub, and you throw in some spice in that too. You'd be good to go.
See, I like to have my meat have a little bit of spice to it. So I throw in the cayenne, I throw in the chipotle chili, just because it's got a nice little kick that when you eat it, you're like, man, this because it offsets the sweetness of that brown sugar.
Right, and that's fair. And if you just Google some basic rub recipes, like you'll see right now one of the top recommendation ones. Take a third cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of paprika, 1 tablespoon smoked paprika, 2.5 teaspoons of black pepper, uh, tablespoon of kosher salt, tablespoon of garlic powder, tablespoon of onion powder, and 3/4 pound of mustard powder. And I can tell you from my taste buds alone, that is already a good basis for a dry rub. The only thing I would add to that is I would probably add some Cajun seasoning, but that's just because I like a little more heat in there.
Okay.
I'd probably replace that with a mustard powder if I'm being honest.
Yeah. For me, if you're smoking any of that stuff, you got to go with the dry rub.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's where you get that nice little. You get the ring for one, but you get that nice outer layer, and it's coming right from your rub.
That nice black outer layer of crusty goodness.
Yeah, the bark. I think
Yeah.
it's what it's called, the bark.
I think you're right on that. I believe
Yeah.
that's what it's called.
So, but brisket cuts, I mean, you can't go wrong with them. And I mean, you're going to find bigger briskets. You could probably go to a butcher and get a smaller one, but most of the ones that I have bought previously have been that 10 pounder, 15-pound type of brisket. So,
Yeah. Whole untrimmed brisket usually weighs anywhere between 8 to 20 pounds.
yeah, mine are usually around that 10 to 15 because
Yeah.
I love the leftovers for one. And plus, whenever I do some smoking, maybe we can do a whole thing on smoking one of these times, but I just share it.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to eat 10, 15 pounds of brisket, at least in one sitting. So I usually invite people over and say, hey, have some brisket.
Oh yeah. No, like brisket's a good hearty. Oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like get together cookout food.
Yeah. I think it's one of the staples of just barbecuing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also weird too, because the first time I ever did a brisket, I didn't mess it up. It still tasted fine, but it went, I don't know if it was too much or what I messed up on it. But it definitely was a little chewy, a little dry. So I don't know what I did, but I wound up fixing whatever I did the second time I did one, and it came out a lot better. So I just don't know if that was just a crappy piece of meat I got or what I did. But yeah, brisket is one of those ones too where you leave it go a little too long
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna get yourself a crappy meal.
Right.
So well, I know the other one is actually where your mouse is at. So that's
Oh
uh,
yeah.
the round cut. So a round cut comes from the back of the cow, comes from the legs. So you'll find because of where that cut is, it's so close to the short loin and the long loin that the round is also going to be pretty lean because if you think about it, I mean the cow is moving that back part, so the legs are going to be more of that leaner muscle, that fast twitch, so it doesn't have to worry about seeing too much of some fat in there. And it really is making sure that you kind of know the business end of this. So the top and bottom, and then they also have the rump. So these are best for slow cooking again. Throw it in the crock pot, throw it low and slow, whatever, or even roasted.
Yep.
But you can still get, an eye round, and that would be good to grill as well. So, think the thickness more of the sirloin kind of. You'd probably get it in a nice little 8 ounce, maybe 10 if you can do that, but typically those eye rounds are going to be right around that size.
I actually found a recipe that I think some of the foodies out here might enjoy. This is for ground round. This is a Kenyan ground round curry.
Okay.
And it looks super simple to make. You need 1.5 pounds of lean ground beef.
Well, that's just lean ground beef, though. I mean, you could take anything and just wind up grinding it.
Yeah, it looks like they are using lean ground beef. I thought this was specifically ground round.
No, it just says ground beef.
Well,
yeah, so with this recipe, you can basically take anything and just grind it up as long as it doesn't have a lot of fat in it.
Right. Let's see if I can find a better one real quick.
Yeah, look for maybe like a top round steak or bottom round steak, or even eye of round. That would you might get a better result with those.
There we go. This is coming from the Sprouse Eats. It is a spiced lime marinated eye of round
Yeah, there
steaks.
you go.
Share screen. And here you can see we've got what looks like some lovely steak. 10-minute prep time, 10-minute cook time, marinate for 30 minutes, serving it too. As soon as I can find what's in here, I don't give a shit how many calories it is. It's steak. I'm going to eat it. Fuck off.
Yeah, well, you might want to scroll all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? That's funny that the ingredients are right there.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, these damn things are going to be like, hey, it was a fall summer day, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, I grew up on a farm and we really loved cows, but cows are super fat. And I hate how I have to wait all the way to the bottom about some stupid, memory that this person had.
Right. Even when I rant on our videos, I have the common courtesy to edit most of that shit out for you guys.
Yeah.
So
what do you got?
The ingredients, you got 1 lime that's been juiced, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of black pepper, freshly ground.
Ground coriander. Yeah. So
Ground
let's put a little
coriander.
kick to it.
Yeah.
And then, so I was right. 8 ounce beef of eye round steaks.
Yep. You put your ingredients together. You make the marinade by combining them stuff. Trim off visible fat because apparently this person doesn't know how to live their life. Keep that fat on there. Place trim steaks in resealable plastic bags. Marinate. Refrigerate for 30 minutes. Turning once. Just grill. Looks like they're just grilling over some charcoal right here. Don't use glassware to bake it. Glassware goes boom.
Yeah, so all right, interesting. That's a cool little recipe. Now I feel like eventually we might need to do some shows of some of the recipes. Like I think it'd be pretty cool if you had one of those recipes and be like, look, this is me cooking it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just right now with time schedules and shit.
Yeah, so that next one that you saw on that cow was basically that plate or the flank cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where like your skirt steak, your flank, or even the short rib. So only the short rib should be really slow cooked. Everything else can be done either grilled or fried. So I actually had a recipe that I've done previously before. It's like a Greek salad with the flank steak cut. So I mean, that one's going to be more thinner. It's going to be easier for you to cut, and it cooks really quick because it's not as thick. So essentially, what you do with that one is just season it however you want. I usually throw in salt, pepper, the onion powder, garlic powder, whatever, however you want to do it. But you put it over some lettuce, and in that lettuce, it's got um, tomatoes, you got cucumbers, you have feta cheese, and then there's lemon that you throw over. So there's no dressing, but the lemon kind of brings it all together, and some red onion. Cook, just you don't even need to cook it. Just chop it all up, throw it in there, mix it around, and throw that flank steak on top. That's a pretty good salad.
That sounds delicious.
So
That sounds
flank
like
steak.
sounds like a solid trip to Flavortown right there.
So that's definitely part of the plate. And then the last one of that whole thing is essentially anything that doesn't fall into the ones that we've already talked about.
Right.
And those are basically your other cuts, So obviously it comes in tons of different shapes. There's different textures that are part of it. So the other is again anything that really doesn't fit into that mold. So this is where your burgers come into play because you have to cut them all up.
Yep.
You got to grind them all up. Your corned beef, your minced and ground beef are basically in here. Your shanks, so that comes from the lower part of the legs, and kebabs, your strips, cube steak. Any of those are going to be part of what those other cuts are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we also need to mention that this also does include your organ meats too. So if you want things like liver, things like heart, things like tongue, when you buy a side of beef, you need to talk to your butcher about if you want those things or if you don't. So,
well, you also have to think about what quality you're trying to get to.
yes.
So but before we get to that though, I think kind of talking about the liver, I have not partaken in any of the liver. I have not done a tongue or liver or any of those other weird things. I don't know if you have or not.
Actually, yes, I have. I was pretty much born and raised in a restaurant for most of my life. So I've had um beef liver and onions with like side of mashed potatoes and gravy. I've had beef heart. I've had beef tongue. Food's food. I mean, it liver does have like a almost like a leathery taste to it, but I mean, it's not something I'm gonna go out and seek every day. But if I see it on the menu, I might order it.
More power to you, buddy.
Right. However, I will say some chicken livers with like breaded, and then you coat that in Cajun seasoning, and then you deep fry it, and you serve that with some Heinz 57 steak sauce. That's some good shit.
Well, chicken livers we can save for another time, but there was another recipe I had with brown gravy sauce, so that was pretty good. But
Mm.
do you ever have any of those Rocky Mountain oysters?
I don't think I probably have, not knowing what they were.
Someone feed you freaking cow nuts.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like that's the way to go. Don't waste. If you're gonna kill the animal, don't waste anything.
So I've talked to a couple friends before about that, and they said it's pretty good, but you're not going to sit there and eat them straight up. It's not like they're going to serve the nuts to you and be like, "Here, Rocky
Yeah.
Mountain oysters." No, they actually had a recipe where it was in a ravioli, so they wound up grinding it up, put it in a food processor, and then they used that as the filling for the ravioli. So they said that it was pretty damn good. You couldn't really taste, and I mean it was meat and it had
Yeah.
seasonings and stuff in it, but it's always funny for the listeners that don't know what the Rocky Mountain oysters are. Again, they're basically the bull's nuts.
Yep.
So when they die, they chop those bad boys up, and then typically they're used as pranks, as the low man on the totem pole has got to eat them.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
So, so beef buying tips then. You have a thing on how to ask a butcher, right? Or what to
Well,
ask.
not so much of like how to ask a butcher per se, because if you're gonna buy um this beef, you're probably not gonna meet it at a supermarket. You might find it from a local butcher, but you're more than likely gonna find it from somebody who has a whole cow that they need to get rid of. Where did it go? And actually, I'm going to screen share this article with you from Monette Farms, or is it Monet Farms? And we can kind of go through that together. On the screen?
I see it, man.
All right. This was recently updated November of 2020. And this article goes through just without giving you exact numbers about how much you can save. Um, say here they side their beef, organs have been removed, but before it's butchered into the usable cuts, they sell it for around $5.50 a pound. Quarter of beef is $6 a pound, and that you're looking at approximately 200 to 300 pounds of raw meat there. You're going to lose about no, wait, sorry. The yield after the butchering is around 60 or 70% of the hanging weight. So you're looking at anywhere between 150 to 200 pounds of meat for your freezer. And that weight reduction is a loss during the aging process, bone removal, and just from the cuts you requested. Side of beef, for those of you who are like got relatively decent sized families, this says side of beef can feed a family of 4 for about a year. You'll need essentially a deep freezer because you're going to need a medium-sized chest freezer or medium to large size coolers to transport it home.
Oh yeah, I mean definitely something big. I know that my grandmother we used to go in halvesies with a half a cow, not even a full one. We'd get a half a cow. We'd
Yep.
also get a pig and everything too. But man, there is so much meat in that, and
Mm-hmm.
that stuff would last forever. And it was always funny because we'd joke and say that if there was some type of crazy fallout or if there was any type of war or whatever, we just go to my grandparents' house because they had two big um, freezers full of just meat.
Hmm.
Like they would get a half a cow every 6 or 8 months, something like that. So they didn't eat a whole lot to begin with, and it was funny because it just stocked up. There was tons of bacon, there was tons of prime cuts and things like that that were in there. So that was the joke in my family of, yeah, we'll just go to grandma's house if something's bad because we'll just eat everything there.
Right. And so to delve a little bit more into about how much you could save by doing a whole side of beef, as mentioned, at a roughly 550 per pound, your cost is going to cost you between 1100 and 1650.
Well, I also think it depends on what you're planning on getting, though.
Right.
Like what cut. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think this is probably a good time to talk about the quality. Your prime cut is going to be that 5 star. Like, hey, this is the stuff that's good for grilling. It's very tender. It's juicy. There's going to be some marbling on some of that stuff. So, your prime cut, like grade A, there you go. But then going into the choice cut, it's not as good. It's probably going to be like your 3 star type of meat where a lot of them come from the rib where you can do a lot of braising with this stuff or you can do some simmering. There's going to be some tenderness to it. There's going to be some marbling, but it's not going to be as fine of a texture. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be more coarse with it. So it may not be super tender that you can cut with a fork type deal, but your choice cut is still a decent cut if you're trying to think of what type of money you're going to save. And then, I mean, you have your select cut, which is going to be kind of like your 1 star.
Right.
Hey, it's best for braising and marinating. It's something that it's going to need to break down a little bit before you can finally get that flavor.
Yep.
So they're tough. They're going to be less juicy. They're not going to have tons of flavor in it. And the marbling for it's going to be kind of far and few between. So if you're thinking of buying something from a butcher and you don't mind spending a little bit of some money, so go with the prime cut. I mean, that's going to be your best one. But if you're kind of saving on some money and still want to have steak, I'd recommend getting a select cut because it's not going to be the best, but you can still, do the marinating. You can still kind of break down that toughness, throw in some of that salt, try to get all that stuff down, and it's edible. But you're not going to be whining and dining with that type of quality. So keep
Right.
that in mind for depending on what you're going to do. And then I think it also goes along with what type of cut. Do you want that chuck? Do you want the rib? Your rib is going to be a little bit more. Your short loin is going to be a little bit more pricier than, let's say, your round cut
Mm-hmm.
or even the shank cut. I mean, those are going to be the tough, dry stuff versus something that might be tender, flavorful, fatty. So when you're talking about that with the butcher, you should say, hey, I'm only looking for maybe the shank cut, or I'm looking for something that's not going to be as expensive, and kind of get those type of ones.
Exactly. I don't think I could have said that better myself.
When you work for a steakhouse, you kind of pick up some things. You
Right.
kind of have to know. So when a customer says, hey, I want a filet mignon,
Mm-hmm.
well, sir, that's going to be very tender, blah, blah. And then, or if you want something that's like a sirloin, well, just let you know, it's not going to be as tender. It's still going to be blah. So you kind of have to go through the spiel. And you certainly pick some stuff up with uh, the certain cuts just in case there's anything going on. So,
Yeah, buddy.
but it's really interesting to know more of those side cuts because a lot of the steakhouses, I mean, you're only going to get those main ones that I kind of talked about, but the round and that plate, I mean, those are gonna your chuck. Like, they're still good pieces. You're just gonna have to not do it the same way you're gonna do it with, like, let's say, a
Yeah.
porterhouse or a fillet.
Right. Yeah. That's a it's a solid bit of knowledge I think we left some of the foodies with today, man.
I know, right?
So I don't actually think I've got anything else to add to this.
I think it's a pretty good side cut. I mean,
Yeah. Took a little
it's
side cut on the way home.
yeah. So if anybody has any other favorite recipes, you could probably leave them down in the chat, or even tell us about what are some of the things that you do with
Mhm.
your steaks. And if it happens to be a side cut steak, do you have a favorite roast that you do? I know
Mhm.
one of the things that I was told that people do in the South is they throw a can of Dr. Pepper in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the sugar and everything starts breaking down some of that the muscle in it, and it makes it a little bit more tender.
So acts like an enzyme.
Yeah, which
Interesting.
I was always with me whenever my mom or anybody did a roast, they just threw in, some of the water with salt and just let it kind of cook itself. But
You know,
the Coke is, or the Dr. Pepper is also a good one too.
one of the things I like doing, I like taking a flat iron steak and I like taking those thick sesame seed buns,
Okay.
taking some tomato, taking some lettuce, and cheese, and I make basically a steak cheeseburger out of a flat iron steak.
Okay.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's good.
I might have to give that a try. You're gonna have to send me that recipe
I can do that for you.
because I do like flat irons. I think they're a decent cut.
Hmm.
They're, again, not my favorite, but I would certainly eat it, especially if it's almost like a burger.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, foodies, I think we're gonna wrap it up here.
I think we are done for today.
All right. I've been the Meat Viking. I'll have the links posted below this video for, Chai Cat. I did talk to her. She's doing commissions. So at today, they are still open. And also Sassy Decal Diva, the cup maker, who if you even don't want like a R cup, you can custom order a cup from her. Um, really good customer service. She'll do whatever you want pretty much as long as it's reasonable. So and she did our
So,
cups, and our cups are kind of weird, so I think you'd be okay.
yeah, I know, right? We were very, very difficult asking for what we were trying to get.
So, but I've been the Meat Viking and my wonderful host,
Yeah,
Professor
man.
Pork Loin.
Get the pork loin up in here.
Get the Meat Viking up in
AKA
here.
Dr. Chef Hubs for me.
That's right. Well, foodies, we will see you next time.